If you've ever owned a PS1, then you've probably played one of the more iconic RPGs of its age, with absurdly popular titles like Chrono Cross, the Final Fantasy series, and more than I can even list here. With these absurdly popular ones, there are always ones that are overshadowed and left to be known as underappreciated or cult classics. As such, many of you may have heard of Legend of Dragoon in passing, but probably have never played the game. For those who have, you'll know that it's one of those games that people need to play through at least once. Between the amazing addition system in combat, the robust soundtrack that's one of the most iconic of its era, and of course, the famous debug room that lets you travel throughout the world. It's simply an experience that can't be missed. Hold on, debug room? There's no way that such a thing would be left in the game, right? I'm sure whoever was responsible for this at Japan Studio was thinking, well, as long as it's sealed off from the rest of the world with no way to access it, it should be okay right here, right? Just under 23 years later, the speedrunning community was able to use that decision to take a run that clocked in at just over 10 hours for a top time and turn it into this.
If I get into a fight, I'm dead. I have 3 level 0 darts. They will be dead as soon as the fight starts.
Before we talk about these recent findings, we need to head all the way back to 2001, where times were simpler. YouTube was nowhere to be found, instant messaging was limited to things like MSN Messenger, Yahoo, and AIM, and of course, all of your important gaming information was being housed and talked about on game FAQs. Deep in the archives of guides and walkthroughs lies a document from August 2001, with cheat codes allowing access to the debug room in all versions of the game, including the US demo version from Jam-Pack Summer 2K. This was the first time anyone was able to even dive into such a thing, and the guide was there to help people understand it. The entire debug room is housed in this black void and nothingness, with small paths going to places that are listed in Japanese. There are 4 rooms, one for each disc, and they take you to various places throughout these discs. Want to skip disc 2 because you hate how slow it is? There's a room for that. Want to go to the moon and beat the game? There's a room for that. Want to save Lavitz from an unfair death and save his bromance with Dart? Sorry buddy, there's no room for that. On the other hand, some say that if we get the video to 10,000 likes, you can save Lavitz from the depths of hell. So like the video or Lavitz dies again. Anyways, outside of using cheat codes, there's no way for anyone to get to the room. For present day speedruns of Legend of Dragoon, these cheat codes were not allowed in runs that were submitted to leaderboards. So this kept the speedrun at a ridiculous length of anywhere from 11 to 13 hours on average. Well, that is until February 28th, 2022. This is Dylan. He's completely new to speedrunning LOD, and this is the run that he was able to achieve on that day. 7 hours and 39 minutes. Nearly 2.5 hours faster than the current any percent record set by Lasagna with the turbo controller allowed. So how did Dylan do this? The only way to access the debug room was through a cheat code, right? Let's roll back to about April of 2008, back to our trusty forum at Game FAQs. The Legend of Dragoon boards are brimming with activity, and questions are being posed to veteran players every day, including this one. Legend of Dragoon doesn't have a New Game Plus category, so what's going on here? A user by the name of Cablevision2 was one of the first to have a semi-consistent way documented to make this happen. First, you need to have a save at the beginning of the game in slot 1, and an in-game save file in another slot. If you're loaded into the early game file, and you go to save over the late game file, you can interrupt it about 2 to 3 seconds in to corrupt the data and grant your early game save various pieces of equipment, dragoons, and items from the late game. The effects varied based on many different factors, but the result is something commonly known today as save corruption. This effect is commonly seen in Super Nintendo games, but with a less extreme outcome. In my older Chrono Trigger save corruption video covering the true any percent category, runners reset on a specific subframe when saving to swap items in their inventory. In the Chrono Trigger tool assisted speedrun, there's an extremely precise set of resets that overwrite one of the overworld coordinates to change the position of the player on loading. Knowing this concept, I'm sure you're guessing what's going to happen next. Remember folks, this is still kind of early on in the discovery era of speedrunning, so developments are pretty slow in general. Knowing this, our next development won't happen for another 4 years. In 2012, the Speed Demos Archive forum was the main place for people to talk about speedrunning and how to improve the games that they were working on. This is where the threads begin to weave together in a post made by the 2012 robot on April 30th, 2012, saying that there are two ways to get to the debug room we mentioned a while back. The first being the cheat code that was referenced before, and the next one being through save corruption. Basically, if you took the method that was used to make the New Game Plus glitch happen, and instead used two files at the very first save point in the game, you can make a second save and specifically time a reset to corrupt yourself into the debug room. This was it, the holy grail of Legend of Dragoon speedrunning, right in front of the community's face. Sadly, this part of our story does not end well, as their dreams of a broken game are whisked away as quickly as they appeared. His debug room that he generated did not function properly, and he was unable to be sent anywhere with the warps. He was so close, but unfortunately, the mystery was not solved, so runners kept routing the game as if the room didn't exist for them. Now mind you, this was 10 years ago. Glitch hunting for speedrunning was still in its infancy. There was no central hub for community leaderboards, Discord wouldn't exist for another 3 years, and only some people used Skype for IMing about strategies and findings. Not only that, but the community was still extremely underground, and any interest regarding the community was focused on events like GDQ and individual speedrunners like Siglemic. With the towel thrown in and the debug room appearing to be useless, it seems that speedrunners and the Legend of Dragoon community in general would move on, with the secrets of the debug room being lost forever. That is, until about 6 years later. On July 28th of 2018, a tool-assisted speedrunner by the name of NhatNM uploaded a 12-minute and 33-second video titled PSX, Legend of Dragoon, Sample Warp to Debug Room. This was interesting, because we already knew warping to the debug menu was possible from the 2012 robot, but he couldn't do anything with it. Surely this was going to have the same outcome, right? Incredibly, Inhat was not only able to use the warps in the debug room, but he was also able to use it to enter the moon on Disk 4. This was the first time someone has ever bypassed the issue of not being able to do anything in the room, so what was the difference? For starters, save corruption is a very tricky business to get into when trying to make it consistent. Even a single frame of deviance from the previous result can change just about everything with the outcome of the next. Also, with the advancements in how emulators worked in the last decade or so, it became much easier to test and work on things within that space. Inhat used BizHawk in this video, compared to the 2012 robot trying this on console. While these findings are amazing, there's also another issue that arises with the save corruption that I didn't talk about earlier. Sometimes, your characters can become glitched when doing this glitch. The New Game Plus glitch would occasionally spit out characters in your party that are level 0. Normally something like this wouldn't be a big deal, but your party is filled with 3 darts, and they all have 0 HP and MP. This has some horrible effects if you end up in a battle while your characters are in this state. You actually immediately lose the battle. Again, we trade one problem for another. With this situation, you can only go so far in an area before taking an encounter and simply having a game over. As a veteran tasser, Inhat wasn't about to have that. So less than a week later on August 2nd, Inhat posted a video showing how to fix this, and he did it with another save corruption glitch. Basically, if you do the save corruption again in a specific way, you can uncorrupt the levels and continue playing. The way that Inhat did this doesn't really allow for progression though, as going behind Celis doesn't let the player progress back into town, causing a softlock upon entering. This version of the debug room exploit was considered to be almost viable at the time, but once again it eluded the grasp of the community, and it would stay like that for the next few years. There were other instances of the debug menu popping up in the speedrunning community randomly, including one from top runner Black Death Doom, who experienced it on the Japanese version of the game. However, whenever he would try to open the menu after getting the debug room, the game would simply softlock. The runner I mentioned earlier, Lasagna, was also interested in this and wanted to try and replicate it on his own. So he did some research in October of 2021 and stumbled across the videos I was talking about earlier. The good thing about his research is he was able to do what Inhat accomplished in his uploads. He had gotten the debug room, fixed the level glitch, and even generated 255 broadswords in his item inventory and 32 in his equipment inventory. Unfortunately, when trying to fix the level 0 glitch in a way that got him back into the debug room, he was unable to warp anywhere. Again, this was uncharted territory for yet another runner. If someone could just get through the debug room with everything intact, the game would be broken wide open. Thankfully, this wouldn't take long because Lasagna had an idea. An idea so great that it was even considered genius because of how impactful it was. What if you didn't have to fix the level 0 problem with the specific save that InHat did? What if you could do it anywhere in the game? That's exactly what he did. A few months later, he solved the problem of being stuck by simply doing the second save corruption somewhere else. So that fixed the level 0 problem, but what about the darts in the party? Through some testing and research, Lasagna came up with an initial route that would take the runner to Aglis and onward from there. This specifically was required due to it being the best place to remove and add back your characters in Disc 4 thanks to the psychedelic bomb trials. So what was the result? On February 13th, 2022, Lasagna was able to get all the way to the final boss using a route that involves several things. When he fixes the glitch characters, all of them end up being the minimum level they're supposed to be, with the focus being on Miranda, who is level 23. Typically, when you've had Shauna in your party before, the game gives Miranda the exact same level, stats, and equipment as what Shauna had. Since she's never joined the party, the game just sets Miranda to her default level that it thinks she should be when you first get her. From there, he went through most of Disc 4 as usual, and after multiple hours of pushing through the game, he was ready to take on Melbu Frama. This was it, the culmination of decades worth of effort, all put into a single run. Ready to take years worth of work and experience, he heads into the final battle and gets completely destroyed. Eight and a half hours, and Phase 1 of the final boss ends the first ever emulator debug room run of Legend of Dragoon. Thankfully though, the run didn't die in vain, as this ordeal lit a spark in the community. And over the next couple weeks, Lasagna, Black Death Doom, and others started testing ways to make this work, even on console. A semi-consistent method used to set up the debug room was made, and the info was shared on the Legend of Dragoon forum on speedrun.com. However, when runners tried to test all of this on console, yet another problem began to bubble up. No one could get the same results as compared to emulator. EDD kept getting menu crashes, Lasagna kept getting random items outside the 255 plus 32 broadswords, and as for Dylan, the newest runner in the community, well, you already know that part of the story. Runners discovered that even though you delete all of your save data from the game, there's ghost data left over that interferes with what items are generated upon the debug room corruption, so not everyone ends up being dealt the same hand when performing these glitches. So what's the consequences of all of this? A couple of new categories were created and some separated, with any percent being separated into the any percent and any percent classic categories. The new any percent category that allows the debug menu only allows runs that create the same results as emulator, meaning that the 255 plus 32 broadswords and the 3 level 0 darts need to be the result of the corruption to level the playing field. Runners are still actively working to make this consistent. At the time of this recording, the only way to do the debug room with the blank slate requirement is to use either a memory card that has never had a Legend of Dragoon save on it, or to overwrite the memory with other games in such a way that the ghost data is somehow no longer there. These tests are still early, so runners may find a better way soon. It's only a matter of time before Legend of Dragoon speedrunning's holy grail is truly claimed, and when the puzzle is solved, the whole community is going to race to the top, pushing this game further beyond anything seen before. If you would have told someone back in 2001 that the debug room would be accessed without cheat code, they would have looked at you like you're insane, and rightfully so. It just goes to show that with an effort put in by so many people, anything can be accomplished. Stay hydrated, folks, and thanks for watching.